Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians at the DNA company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is in your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, and other healthcare professionals.
Hello and welcome back to the DNA Talks podcast. I'm Bryce Wild, co-founder and chief of innovations at the DNA company. By 2025, 1.1 billion women worldwide will be in menopause, yet many remain uninformed and unprepared. Around 20% of women don't know what stage of menopause they're in, while 78% feel it interferes with their lives, and 64% feel unprepared. Menopause is often seen as a taboo topic, leaving women feeling alone and embarrassed with limited access to relatable information. But today we're changing all of that. Known as the menopause educator and researcher, Andrea Donsky is a nutritionist on a mission to change the conversation around perimenopause and menopause. An entrepreneur with nearly 25 years' experience in the health and wellness industry, Andrea is a very respected, multiple award-winning influencer, soon to be published researcher, media personality, speaker, and author. She hosts the popular podcast Menopause Reimagined and appears as a menopause expert on TV across North America. To date, Andrea has an impressive more than 500 TV segments and has been featured on every major network across the US and Canada. Her latest venture, Morphus, helps women to reimagine menopause as a journey of empowerment so they feel heard, supported, and validated. Morphus empowers women to take control of their symptoms and health with nutrition, lifestyle, research, and evidence backed supplements. Andrea is also currently writing a book about menopause, which excitedly will be published in the spring of 2026 by Simon Schuster. She's also a good friend and colleague of mine. Andrea Donsky, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bryce. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
Listen, you become a strong advocate for redefining menopause. Let's start there. What does this concept even mean to you? And ultimately, how do you see this changing the way women are experiencing and talking about menopause in this day?
Well, I think for me, it was really the fact that when I went into perimenopause, I didn't even know the word perimenopause existed when I started having my first set of hot flashes at the age of 47. But I now realize I had been experiencing symptoms since my mid 30s, but didn't even know what they were. And the stigma around it. Like I remember when I was sitting at my desk and I got that first hot flash and I was like, what is going on? Why am I getting a hot flash? Am I in menopause? Wait a second. Isn't my grandmother in menopause? Isn't my mother in menopause? Like I really didn't know anything about it. And Bryce, you've known me for a very long time. I was like, for me, my whole work, everything that I did was about understanding my body really well. But yet, I knew nothing about this phase of life. So, redefining or reimagining menopause is really being proud of the stage that we're in and really helping to dismantle this whole stigma around it and around menopause being for older women, and it's not. And women as early as 35 can go into perimenopause, right? Or menopause, the average age is 51 and a half in North America. So really helping to get rid of the stigma, talk about it more so that we can all be prepared. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing is that many of us Gen Xers were thrown into it because it was never discussed. Our parents, my
Sure.
mother never discussed it with me. My grandmother never discussed it with me. My doctor never brought it up with me. I never learned about it in school. I mean, our kids in grade 5 learn about puberty. They don't learn about perimenopause or menopause. Even our high schoolers don't. So, and our doctors aren't that well educated around it. So I think for me, redefining it and reimagining it is really talking about it more so that we can be prepared and that we have solutions so women don't have to suffer.
Well, thank you for filling the gap because there's so long been a void. And in fact, there's a lot of confusion around what to do about it when it so-called strikes. It's really not the set of symptoms is nothing to be so concerned about other than it's, a rite of passage, but people don't have to suffer. Menopause is often reduced to these few well-known symptoms, hot flashes and sweats and mood changes, but they're actually hundreds of potential symptoms. Can you walk us through what menopause really is and how you would define it or how you're redefining it and how these diversity and multitude of symptoms are actually affecting women so differently?
So here's where I would say is our expertise. So when I going back years ago, I was at a party and I met an old friend and I asked her what she was doing. And she told me that she was creating an app for menopause symptoms. And at the time I was shocked because I'm like, what do you mean? Menopause symptoms? Are there actually that many that you can create an entire app? I mean, to create an app, you need like a plethora of symptoms. And she was like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. There are like 34 to 40 symptoms. And I was like, oh, wow. I didn't even realize there are that many. And I went home, and Bryce, you know me really well, and you know the way my brain works. I went home and I created a Google Doc and I started tracking what those symptoms were. And then over the years, I started seeing that there are way more than 35 or 34 to 40 symptoms. And that got me thinking. And because I love research so much, and we have an incredible community of women and friends and colleagues, and just people who now we realize are going through this and everyone feeling so alone, I started asking questions of like, okay, well, what are you experiencing? And looking at the medical journals and looking at Facebook groups and looking at online at what people were saying. And I quickly realized that there are way more than the 34 to 40. So we started creating surveys, and we launched our first survey, which is called our Signs and Symptoms Survey, in 2022. We now have almost 5,000 responses to that survey. And
Wow.
what we know is that there are way more than the original or recognized. So if you Google or you go online, you're like menopausal symptoms or how many symptoms are there, you'll see that they'll say over and over again that there are 34 recognized symptoms.
Hmm.
We have now, and we're going to be published, this is going to be published, our abstract will be published in the journal Menopause in December. There's actually 103 plus. So our research is showing that there are way more than 34 recognized. In fact, there are well over 100.
Wow. And so give us a taste of some that are most prevalent, and then perhaps some of those that are recently onboarded as, wow, shock. I didn't know that it was anything related to menopause, but is so imperative that people do relate it to menopause and perhaps even do something about it, which we'll talk about soon.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with actually a couple of statistics before I even go there. So what our research shows is that 20% of women don't know what stage they're in.
Right.
20%. I was one of those 20%. And we know that on average, the women in our surveys experience 31 different symptoms. 31 on average. 90% experience at least 13 symptoms, and 10% experience more than 50 symptoms. So women are suffering. So what are the symptoms? So we know, so we'll talk about the top, I'll do the top 10 or even the top 15. And then what I can do is talk about women in perimenopause who experience different symptoms more so than women in menopause and vice versa. So the number one symptom that we know across the board. So when we think about menopause, usually the first thing that comes to mind is hot flashes, right? That was what it was for me. We
Sure.
think, oh, hot flashes, menopause. It's synonymous. However, the number one most common symptom is actually fatigue. Over 70%
Interesting.
of women are exhausted and experience fatigue, more common in perimenopause than menopause. And I'll go through those. Brain fog, number two, extremely common with over 66% of women experiencing it. Sleep issues, number three. Memory loss,
Huge.
anxiety, loss of libido, joint pain, lack of concentration, lack of focus. Hot flashes are number 10, which I found really interesting. Then we have lack of patience, night sweats, slower metabolism, changes in body shape, and then digestive issues. So those are the top 15. So again, very interesting. What our research is showing us is that so many women are suffering with fatigue, brain fog, memory issues, sleep issues, and then the hot flashes are relegated to number 10. Still very common with over almost 57% of women experiencing it, but not at the top of the list.
Sure.
And when it comes to women in perimenopause, they're more likely to experience the fatigue, anxiety, lack of patience, headaches or migraines, being emotional or weepy, and social anxiety. And those in menopause are more likely to experience sleep issues, hot flashes, and night sweats, a slower metabolism, changes in body shape. This is where the weight gain comes in, as well as
Right.
inflammation. So we broke it down by stage as well.
So interestingly, and that's incredible plethora of symptoms. I'll never forget, by the way, quick anecdote. Grew up single parent family, mom, two sisters, so a lot of estrogen in that family. And I'll never forget, it was almost like the day, the week, maybe the month that my mother, Jekyll and Hyde.
Mhm.
So crying. I was a young boy, in my early to mid teens. She couldn't contain her emotions any longer. She was bouncing back and forth between crying uncontrollably to angry. This was not my mom. I didn't understand until, at the time, this is obviously long before the Women's Health Initiative and, estrogen is no longer good. You go to your doctor and the doctor was prescribing hormone replacement therapy. So I know he made this recommendation to her because she explained it to me and told me about it. And we would have a very open dialogue and open relationship. So a couple of months went by and she was, unconsolable and angry and just all over the place. And to your earlier point about energy, complaining about how she had no energy. She'd bike ride everywhere. We'd go out on weekends and walk, and she just all of a sudden was lethargic. And anyway, went on this hormone replacement therapy and then kind of came back full circle to herself. And even to this day, I explain to my patients, because we, again, this is rite of passage. This is going to happen to all women and men, by the way. And we can talk very briefly, maybe if we have a chance, about andropause. Happens to us as well. Interestingly enough, we don't necessarily liken this to any other type of hormone, significant hormone dysregulation. So, for example, I explain to my patients all the time, look, imagine if you're not necessarily diabetic, but if all of a sudden insulin tanks almost overnight and you can't regulate blood sugar, insulin's a hormone, or if thyroid hormones all of a sudden, by the way, these are all tied in throughout menopause as well. But if
Mhm.
thyroid hormones all of a sudden tank, or for that matter, get too elevated in the case of, autoimmune thyroiditis, they initially peak. Your body goes through incredible transformation, not necessarily good at all. And the same thing's happening with estrogen. Estradiol's often highlighted as this key hormone during menopause. So just explain for people, what is happening again for all of these symptoms to occur. The vital symptoms like metabolism, bone health, brain function, like you were describing. The crux of the matter is essentially estradiol's in significant decline.
Yeah, hormones. So I always say my lane is nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, and research. I'm not a hormone expert.
Sure.
However, and you would probably be able to explain from the hormonal standpoint much more. But yeah, it has to do with our estrogen that, and in perimenopause, it's really our estrogen is going up, it's going down, it's going up. It can go up to like 3 times its regular, its regular where it's supposed to be. Progesterone is going down. You've got the ratio and the more of the discrepancy between the hormones, but between estrogen and progesterone, and you got testosterone. So everything is kind of in flux in peri. And then once you're in menopause, things, your hormones settle into the menopausal ranges. But for all the symptoms, there is definitely that hormonal tie-in. And what's really interesting, Bryce, is because I'm writing my book right now, or looking and really dissecting all of the 103 symptoms, we actually started breaking it down by systems in the body. And I think you're going to
Love it.
find this really fascinating. So, what do you think, given your experience, what do you think is the number one system that is being affected when it comes to those symptoms?
I don't know what your research found, but I have to think from a clinical perspective, the one system that keeps coming up because it governs all other systems is brain and nervous system. I don't
Bingo.
know.
That's
Oh,
it.
really?
It's
Oh,
the nervous system.
yeah,
Number one system, then endocrine, then we've got our digestive system.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
there's really compelling research recently, only maybe a few months old, out of the University of Arizona, showing that estradiol replacement actually reduces Alzheimer's. Speaking of brain nervous system, by maybe up to 75%, right? And by the way, at the DNA company, we're often looking at cardiovascular cognitive decline risks in this gene called the ApoE gene,
mm,
which is linked to Alzheimer's. And
mhm.
early intervention with HRT, because the coin's been flipped here with the Women's Health Initiative and the review of all of this sort of shock and awe around estrogen is going to cause cancer. HRT, bioidentical, by the way. There's a
Yeah,
huge
the
difference.
HRT, yeah.
Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, but may make actually a significant difference in preventing neurodegenerative diseases, let alone, by the way, the symptoms we're talking about, these 103 symptoms. So this brain fog, lack of attention, focus, alertness, concentration, inability to sleep, circadian rhythm upset, as you're describing, memory and cognitive components. So, I mean, this is brain and nervous system. It
Exactly,
controls the body, right? So when it's not fueled
exactly.
with the ability to govern, right? Or and the hormones are that. Hormones in Latin essentially means controller, right?
Mhm.
Of all things. And the brain and nervous system, when that starts to lack the chemistry and the ability to, by the way, I mean, I always fall back, by the way, and I'm no hormonal expert. I do take a significant interest in it. Of course, I have to. And clinically, I see a lot of women who are entering menopause and or have hormonal disruption. But I just fall back on evolutionary biology for so many things to, grasp and make understanding of how the body works and why it works the way it works. You know, life expectancy for women historically, anyways, we're talking about even a couple of hundred years and more ago, often ended around menopause. If you think about it, you know, this highlights how essential hormones that end up declining around this age that we're talking about, perimenopause and menopause, like estradiol, because there's estrone and there's estriol, but estradiol is the name of the game here. And it's, this is almost like a longevity secret here, right? And how modern bioidentical hormone replacement therapy specifically can change a woman's life, add years, healthy years, health span on her life. So we're not just talking about, and this is what I'm saying, not just talking about managing symptoms in this rite of passage. We're actually talking about avoiding cognitive decline, maybe even Alzheimer's, and certainly adding health span or quality of life and extending on, calendar years, right?
So 2 points to that. So number 1, yes, absolutely what you're saying in terms of the brain and when it comes to the symptoms. So what our research showed is that 50% of the top 10 most common symptoms are actually brain cognitive mental health related. 50%. However, we could argue that it's actually 90%.
Hmm.
So you're spot on in terms of what you're saying. So 90% of it. So it's all so intermingled and everything works together. To your point about hormones, and again, I'm not the expert, but what I love about the fact that I'm talking to you and the DNA company on the DNA Talks podcast is that and this is what I learned from you, I don't know how many years ago, Bryce, when when I originally got tested for my genetics, is that if you're going to go on hormones, understanding your genetics is very important. How
Sure.
is your body metabolizing your estrogen? Like how do you detox? How do you methylate? So this is where I love that you're talking about this, and for women to understand that if they are going to go on it, because certain women may, and this is your expertise of like how you shoot in your estrogen, how you shoot it out, right? How does your body detox all of those hormones? So that's an important conversation to be had if you are considering to go on hormone replacement therapy.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, yes, at the DNA company, because we take such high regard for systems approach to genomics, that is to say, what is your sex steroidal pathway, hormone pathway looking like? What do you do genetically? How do you make and clear hormones, your methylation cycle? Even your neurotransmitters, by the way, there's a clear link between estrogen, estradiol, particularly, and neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline, GABA, especially in regard to mental health, big topic of the day. Hormonal decline post menopause contributes to issues like depression and anxiety. In fact, a lot of women who going through perimenopause, I'm sure
Yeah,
your research would
huge.
show,
Yeah.
they're given antidepressants when probably they should be using bioidentical hormone therapy. But one thing we do well at the DNA company is qualify an individual for the sort of type and amount and how they metabolize hormones. There's a cohort for which this is dangerous, and we can tease that out of the literature that for some folks, it's not for everybody. For some folks, that what we otherwise term, we can get into the weeds in this maybe, but estrogen dominant with what we affectionately refer to estrogen toxic. That is to say, you're just not as good as the average in clearing estrogen. And these individuals, when they have these pathways sort of sped up, if you will, genetically, they may not be the most ideal to receive bioidentical hormone therapy. But you have solutions and natural medicine through diet and supplements and so forth that
Mhm.
can up and down regulate some of these pathways very effectively, but don't
Exactly.
necessarily push them to the point where they can't manage so efficiently and therefore potentially create more harm than good. So yeah, let's talk a little bit before we get into the biomechanics and or genomics around this, but this link between, because we brain and nervous system, but the onset of depression And sort of, I think you encapsulated earlier was just sort of no energy, right? No energy and brain fog. And but this is regarded, and it just seems to have overlap. It's regarded as an indication to just sort of make a prescription for antidepressants, and that bothers me.
So you're not alone. We actually did another survey, which is going to be published as well, our abstract, which is called our doctor's visit survey. And we had 1,050 women who filled out that survey. And what we found is that the number one treatment option that doctors are currently giving patients is antidepressants. Now, very closely, hormones come in number two, and then number three is actually supplements, which I found really interesting. But yeah, it still is the number one thing. And unfortunately, doctors, because they're not really educated, I mean, there's obviously those that attended, the Menopause Society conference, and they're getting more educated. They were sold out this year, which was amazing. This is where I actually showcased my 4 posters there, which was very exciting for me. And what we know is that more and more doctors want to learn about it, but we still need so much more work in that area, because unfortunately, 40% of women are still being dismissed by their healthcare practitioners. So, and
Right.
only this is
Well, they're not
interesting.
up to speed, by the way. Those are the individual practitioners and doctors who just simply are practicing 30, 40 years outdated, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, they're not up to speed, and so much has changed. So that's why it's
Yeah.
important that they are educated, but also educated from a genetic standpoint. And that's
Right.
why for me, like whenever, again, because I don't really talk about this, is not my lane, but I've tried it myself. You and I've had many conversations about it, that it's really important that you understand how your body works and is it right for you. And by the way, even if you are on hormones, you can still take supplements, right? And you still want to look at nutrition, and you still want to look at lifestyle factors. So everything, we've got this incredible toolbox now where we didn't have years and years ago, that we can pull things from.
Right.
So I always say, like, you've got nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, you've also got and or hormones if that's what you choose to do, and everything can work synergistically together.
For
And
sure
just
they
one
can.
more quick note about doctors from our survey, we also found that out of women, so we asked women if they spoke to their doctor about of doctors or healthcare provider about their symptoms. 89% of the women said they do. However, only 10% of doctors are bringing up the topic with the women. So that's where we're like, okay, so much needs to change, because and are making the connection between how they're feeling and it being perimenopause and menopause. Only 10% of the doctors brought it up, and 75% of the women brought it up to their doctors. So it's
Hmm.
just fascinating to see how much work we still have to do. And I'm excited to go back in let's say 3 years, and then reevaluate our research and see how much has changed.
Yeah. I think and that's a huge disconnect. And once again, kudos to
Huge.
bring this to shed light on, because I think it'll get the conversation.
Yeah.
You've got the conversation started, but it'll help doctors to sort of create more of a bilateral or two-way street on the conversation.
Mhm.
There's major misconceptions about how genetics can impact menopause, and a lot of the discussion on genetics is, one's predisposition to cancer as it relates to hormones. BRCA1 and 2 breast cancer, HER2 hormone estrogen receptor pause. This is not what we're talking about at the DNA company when we talk about genetics. We're talking about those pathway genomics. Do you feel comfortable, just sort of walking us through what your experience was and how maybe it enlightened you to some degree to learn about your own genomic pathways?
So for me, it's interesting. I just on my podcast, I just talked about the fact that I think when I first got my genetics tested way back, I think when was it? 2016? It might have been, it was a long time ago
That's
when
when
you
we
first
started.
started
Yeah.
working. Yeah, so it's 2016. So I had my genetics tested, and I remember at the time somebody who read me the report, it wasn't you, and he had said to me that I'm highly androgenic, which I know. And then based on what my report came back and my genetics, that if I'm on any type of bioidentical hormones, hormone therapy, anything at the time, and remember, in 2016, I didn't even know I was in perimenopause, but I had been on progesterone for many, many years, progesterone cream, and I was on it for fertility, and I was on it in 2016. And I remember he walked in and he was like, if you're on anything, get off it now. Like now you need to get off it. And I remember I was like super scared, because I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like this was somebody that, in a position of authority that was like, get off it. And I did get off it. And then then I started having all those crazy symptoms, like 2017 was when it started getting really bad. And now, and understanding my genetics at the time, I'm like, okay, I'm not a candidate. It's not for me. It's not something I should do. But now looking back, I wish that I had really known or understood more, because like you said earlier, there are things that we could do that can help the pathways, that can help
Sure.
us do certain things, right? So I kind of, and you can't look back and regret anything, but I kind of wish that I had been more informed, and at least, or had spoken to people that were more informed about menopause and knowing, perimenopause and all that, that I perhaps could have incorporated it a little bit more. One of the things that I'm really enjoying right now, and I'm watching it carefully in terms of how it impacts my hormones, is DHEA. And that's something that I'm playing with, because that will help with estrogen, it'll help with testosterone, and maybe a little bit of the progesterone. So I feel, and that's kind of my journey in terms of, I wish I had a more awesome story to share, but it's
Well,
more of
it's interesting because you're describing, the evolution of gene information is always ongoing. Your genes never change.
never
DNA
changing.
doesn't change. You got the cards
Yep.
mom and dad have dealt you, and you described your cards
Not,
as
not great,
androgen.
unfortunately.
Well,
My cards
I mean,
aren't
there's
great when
no
it
good
comes
or
to
bad. There
hormones.
really just is what we have, and then we can
Right.
do something about it. In fact, that's our, our promise at the DNA company. We're never going to test anything we can't do something about.
Which is great.
But when it comes to scale, or rather spectrum of where we all sit, this is not the story, of course, of XX or XY and what makes us male or female at birth. This is the story of where are we individually as males or females biologically on the spectrum of androgenicity, that is to say, hormone male androgen testosterone dominant, or estrogenicity, or the female hormone estrogen dominant, because all men have estrogen in them, all females have testosterone in them, and that's absolutely necessary. It's the genes that we look at really describe the pathways that are involved in converting one hormone to another, because this is a stepwise process. And it starts with cholesterol, actually. You mentioned DHEA. That's a master hormone. And sometimes that's a brilliant thing to include into a bioidentical hormone replacement repertoire if your genes dictate, that might be useful in particular. And your functional analysis, that is to say, blood work and tracking, is also very important. And of course, what are your symptoms? What are you trying to manage? But so this master hormone DHA, which is born out of cholesterol, and how cholesterol then is translated into pregnenolone, and then of course progesterone. This is the cascade. It's like a waterfall, and
Mhm.
streams and creeks. Progesterone, all of that in anybody turns into testosterone through a hormonal gene pathway, and then testosterone will turn into estrogen. And then estrogen will form estrogen metabolites, and those estrogen metabolites have to leave the body. These are all the things that we look at. So these enzymes, one of them we know as CYP17A1, that converts cholesterol into hormones like testosterone and progesterone. And from there, something called aromatase converts testosterone into estrogen. It can get complex. It doesn't matter. The level of complexity is there. We make it very easy to understand. The point, though, is if you imagine your body like this factory that's producing all of these hormones at any given time, some of us have lines within that factory that are just producing more of the product than others at the end of the day. And there is a fallout, and this fallout from factory, whatever is left over, has to be discarded efficiently. Some people don't do that effectively. So it's turning up or down the dial as to manage or optimize your genetic expression. So you can't change your genes, but you can certainly optimize or manage the genetic expression better. And by the way, and I'll just say, at the time, 2016, whoever consulted you on your hormone report also didn't have the information available
No,
that we do now, that hormone
correct.
replacement therapy has the level of safety and efficacy that it does post women's health initiative. Just tell us a little bit about, from your perspective as a hormone educator, what does this information now coming down the pipe mean for you, and of course all these subset studies?
Well, I think it's great that things are changing and that women will get help, that get the help that they need. I think I actually interviewed one of the women, Dr. Joanne Manson, who was one of the leads on the Women's Health Initiative. I've interviewed her a couple of times, which I found really, really interesting. But I think that there's so much, like, I wish that we could do an updated study using bioidentical hormones, using, because back then they were using Premarin and they were using
Yeah.
progestin. Like, it would be so great if we could do a study nowadays using the bioidentical hormone therapy. And now it's not actually, it's funny, we were saying hormone replacement therapy, now it's called menopause hormone therapy, right? So they're just
Mhm.
even the way they're rewording it. So there's so much more information nowadays, which I think is fantastic. And I love that women have access to hormones if that's something that's right for their body. I just always say, just make sure you speak to somebody who is doing testing and understands your body and understands how you break down those hormones. So I feel that women should be getting the treatment options that they really, really need and so deserve, because they haven't been receiving it for so many years. So I'm happy that the pendulum has swung. I just want to make sure they're doing it, and they're working with a doctor, a practitioner, somebody that understands it well and understands genetics and understands what's happening, even looking at urine metabolites, just looking at what's happening in the moment for them and how they're breaking down those metabolites.
Right. Well, the concerns about its safety, especially as it related to cardiovascular risk, right? Clotting, so forth. And that led to such a decline in its use. But the recent studies is all about when it's used correctly. And again, what we do at the DNA company very well is to help the individual N of one. Studies are interesting because what they do is group people together and then make inference based on large population, which is necessary. Double-blinded, placebo-controlled, multi-center trials is gold standard. But I'm a huge fan of multiple N of one over time tracking. This is functional medicine really at its best, tracking personalized interventions for the individual, looking at their genomics and tracking them on their blood and saliva, urine, sometimes analysis to determine what is best for that N of one. And then,
Exactly.
coming to some conclusions around that individual. But the research, just to summarize this for folks, the recent research around the Women's Health Initiative is that when used correctly, particularly in younger women, that is, below 60 or within 10 years of menopause onset, let's say, and specifically, as we've already alluded to, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is much safer than previously thought. So, Andy, to your original point a moment ago, it's not about progestin. It's also about delivery. So through the skin, perhaps. I wish those trials existed versus oral, because oral
I know, I wish
estrogen,
too.
certainly when it's synthetic, we know how terrible that might be. But tailoring the therapy and understanding individual cardiovascular risk or even cancer risk, understanding genes, and then opting for low dose formulations, and or minimum dose formulations. It's a viable option for managing symptoms like hot flashes, night sweats, the 103 symptoms you're describing. So, point is, this all now stems as new from the Women's Health Initiative. It was a large, long term study conducted in the early 2000s that highlighted increased risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and breast cancer in those using combined estrogen and progestin therapy orally.
Exactly.
And
Right.
these results led to this significant drop in HRT prescriptions, hormone replacement therapy prescriptions. But this most recent research, with a lot of nuanced conclusions, by the way, so and still there's more coming out, and I'm sure your research will help all this be teased out. But it's shown it can be safe when started younger, and particularly when tailored to the individual. So that's what we're trying to drive home. And at the DNA company, we encourage everyone who is listening that hasn't already had a DNA 360 test done to look at it, because it will further define what interventions might be favorable. Let's talk, actually, no, before we talk about nutraceuticals, because that's your area of expertise. You created a line, Morphus. I want to hear more about that, and how you're helping folks with their symptoms naturally. And frankly, the majority of your line, in fact, I would say most all of your line really doesn't require genetic assessment. It's safe and effective to use based on symptoms. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions as a sort of a fun, informative, rapid fire. How do you feel about that? You ready?
Go for it. I like it.
All right. Okay.
I hope I can
So
answer your questions.
you can answer all of them. What's your favorite menopause myth to bust?
Oh my gosh, that you're too young to be in menopause. I mean, that is just the most ridiculous thing. I mean, I have women telling me that they go into their doctor's offices and they're in their 40s and their 50s and they're complaining of symptoms and their doctor's like, "No, you're too young to be in menopause or perimenopause." Absolutely
Top
ridiculous.
I agree. Top 3 foods for menopausal women and why?
I would say definitely protein, really important that we get enough protein, looking about 30 grams of protein per meal. And you want to make sure you get enough because it's important for bones and our brains and our muscles and satiety. And it helps to with our blood sugar. So lots of different reasons why we want to get enough protein. And then I would say our vegetables, because we want to make fruits and vegetables, low glycemic fruits and vegetables, because you want to make sure you're getting 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day. It is a non-negotiable. You want to make sure you have enough fiber. It helps get rid of things that your body no longer needs, including those metabolized hormones, including bacteria, just things that our body no longer needs. And then I would also say, I mean, there's just three. My gosh, there's so many. I would
Of
say
course.
also be mindful of you want to make sure you're getting good quality fats because our brain needs fat. And you want to look at olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, more in moderation. You want to look at perhaps ghee, grass fed butter, like just avoiding seed oils because seed oils are things like corn, cottonseed, canola, sunflower, safflower, soy. These are seeds that these are oils that really increase inflammation in the body. And we're already more prone to inflammation as we go into perimenopause and menopause. So we want to avoid eating things that really increase that inflammation. So if I have to stop at 3, I'd say those are 3 very important points, but there's way more
I
than that.
I think those are an excellent top 3 to start with. Worst advice you've ever heard about menopause?
Personally or just in general?
Oh,
I
either
would
way.
I'll give a general one. So I would say this is way too common, and we reported this actually in our doctor's visit survey, and women are basically told when they go in and they speak to their doctor about their symptoms, the worst advice is eat less, exercise more.
And that is overly common and unfortunately
Way too
terrible.
common. Like,
I
it's
think
so common. Like, it's actually sad that how common it is.
there's a lot of research coming down the pipe related to intermittent fasting. Speaking of which, top 3 foods, but how you consume and when you consume those foods, and that's not for everybody. In fact, genes dictate, how important it might be for somebody to entertain the idea of intermittent fasting. But if there was a best way to start your day during
Mhm.
menopause, what would your advice be?
I think everybody's really different. So it really depends on your body and what feels right for you. So I'm a fan of intermittent fasting. I love intermittent fasting. I've been doing it for a long time. And I think it depends also why you're doing it and how you feel on it. So it's not for everybody. I have a lot of women who will see a lot of success on it from being doing it. And then a lot of women will say they don't. So I'm always like, do what feels right for you. If you want to eat when you wake up, I mean, really starting your day with protein. Again, we're always going to go back to that protein. It's really important. So, starting your day with protein, if it means that you're intermittent fasting and you're not eating till noon, again, starting your day with protein, at least bring it in with that protein. And then if you do want to do, and when it comes to intermittent fasting, just a quick note is that we're looking at the optimal for at like 14 to 16 hours, but if you're doing 12 hours and you're hungry, go eat. Like do what however, what makes you feel good. And if you want to work your way up and if you've never done it before, start with like 12, then go to 13, then go to 14. Like you could play around with it and then shake it up too. You don't always want to
Yeah.
do the 14 to 16. Some days don't do it. Some days do a longer fast. Like just listen to your body. I mean, there are experts out there who talk about intermittent fasting specifically for women in menopause and perimenopause. So I would say check out, podcasts like or books from like Cynthia Thurlow, who's a nurse practitioner, Mindy Pels, who's a chiropractor, who really they focus on it in this stage of life. And I'd say if you're interested, definitely go check out their books and podcasts and websites.
Absolutely. Dr. Lyon's a good place to go as well. She's the expert in the muscle of longevity and talks a lot about intermittent fasting and hormone regulation. Without protein, by the way, you just don't make your hormones.
We need protein. It's not even an option. Yeah.
If menopause had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's a good one. Well, I'm going to go from the positive one, an empowerment one. I am woman, hear me roar. I'm gonna have to go
Oh,
from, like,
I like
more of
it.
an empowerment standpoint. Like, I know we can go from the standpoint of, like, the suffering and being in the weeds and not seeing our way out of it, but I really do believe it is such a such a powerful time in our lives. I love being in menopause, and that coincides with me being in my 50s. And I feel like I'm just such a different person than I was in my 20s, 30s, even my 40s. So I would say, yeah, I am woman, hear me roar. It's like we are just coming into our own, and we are, you know, owning it, and, finding our voice. And for a lot of us, finding, coming back, or reinventing ourselves. Like it's a great time, I feel, for women.
I think it's an amazing song. That's Helen Reddy, right? That's that message of strength
I
and
know.
resilience and empowerment.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, I am strong. I'm invincible. I don't know why, but I imagined you saying Gloria Gaynor's "I Will
I
Survive." But
survive.
I
I knew
like
I
your
was gonna
choice. I like your
that was
choice
gonna be like,
because this is not about surviving or pushing through. It's about, empowerment and
yeah.
resilience. And no, I think that's perfect choice. Talk to us about Morphus. I mean, now Morphus, I know is sort of an entity, and as it pertains to both, your podcast, the book, the research, but Morphus, the supplements. What's going on,
Mhm.
and why did you just? I mean, I get it, it's hard to be out there and sort of just talk all about findings. You got to have a solution for folks, and so I understand the impetus there. But tell us a little bit more about what is what is this lineup? What's found in it? What's it solving? What's the feedback of this line of supplements?
Yeah, so we started Morphus in 2022. We launched our first product. And I know, and thank you for all your help, because, understanding ingredients, you've been a huge help to me. And in terms of learning about ingredients, because and best in class ingredients. Like I've always been, I wrote a book called Unjunk Your Junk Food in 2011. So I always had a lot of knowledge and expertise around understanding what we're putting in our body. So when it came to food, and now what I did was I took that and I really applied it to supplements, because when I was suffering back in 2017, 2018, I had such my worst symptoms were hot flashes. Like I couldn't function. And I, would have a hot flash, it would last 30 seconds and it would come back like, 30 seconds after that. Like it was just insane. Like I couldn't function. And I looked at my husband one day and I said, and I was surprised, because being someone who literally spent day in, day out trying to understand their body, helping other women understand health and wellness. This was my vocation. This is what I did 24/7. I was surprised. I was resentful at myself. I was like angry at myself. I'm like, how did I not know how to deal with all of this? And why am I experiencing all this? Right? All these thoughts went through my head. And I looked at my husband one day and I'm like, I'm going to find a solution. I'm finding a solution. And back then, hormones weren't where they are now. And I was already told not to go on it. So I was like, okay, I need to find a solution using supplements. I was already doing nutrition, I was already doing the lifestyle aspect. I needed to find supplements that worked. So I experimented with so many different supplements specifically for women in perimenopause and menopause at that point. And I tried a lot. Some harmed me. I tried a lot. Some didn't. Some were fine. They worked a little bit, then they stopped working. And then I found solutions. And for me, it all had to be based on science and research. Like I wasn't just going to take something because someone had told me to. I was going to take it because I wanted to see what the research said about it. So after experimenting with so many different options, I found solutions that worked for me. And then I do a ton. I love that you mentioned N of one. I do a ton of N of one testing, and I don't recommend anything until I try things myself. I mean, I remember, Bryce, years ago, I had tried an ingredient, and doesn't matter what the ingredient is. And I called you. I'm like, okay, Bryce, something's making something grow. Like I'm always testing and trying to figure out what is safe for women in this phase of life. And that's why I was like, you know what? I'm already doing the research. I'm taking supplements that I find that are very helpful for me and that are shown to help women with specific symptoms. I was like, I just want to create my own line, a line that I can actually feel proud of and that I'm taking myself. And that was really the impetus, was like, okay, I need something to help me with my solutions. And then my business partner, Randy, who I've been in business with for 25 years, the same female business partner, and then our friends and my sister and like colleagues. And I'm like, how can we help women? And that's what really gave us the idea and the want to go and start our own supplement line. And that's what we did. So we have our Morphus line of supplements, all backed by research, ingredients, best in class. We use branded ingredients, efficacious dosages. Like there's no fairy dust in our products. We want to help you feel better. And I tell this story a lot because it's something that really fascinated me, and not really knowing the supplement industry. Like Bryce, you had this is really your expertise. And I remember when I started learning about it and coming to you and talking to you about all this, I was sitting across from a co-man, which is a manufacturer who makes supplements, and this is when we were starting to get into it and starting to look at doing our own. And he looked at me and he was like, okay, so you have two options, Andrea. Do you want to create a supplement line that actually helps women, that's high quality and that's not specifically only based on price and making a ton of money? Or do you want to actually create a supplement line that doesn't have great ingredients, but you can mark them up like crazy and actually make a ton of money? And I looked at him and I'm like, what? Like,
Mhm.
really? Like, are you like, is that
There's a
even
lot
like
of that
a
in the market,
I'm
unfortunately.
like, "Is that even a question?" And he was like, "Oh, you'd be surprised." And I was like, "That's insane to me." So, no, we're here because we want you to feel better. We wanna provide solutions that are safe and effective for you being in this phase of life. And I am
Sure.
so and being that, because I was very like, I had no issue experimenting with supplements before I came into this, into menopause. But now I am extremely particular about what I put in my body because we're much more sensitive and, different things can lead to different things. So now I am very adamant about making sure that the supplements that we have in our line, the products that I have formulated, these are ingredients and products that actually A will help you and B that won't lead to other things down the road because I really try my best to cross my T's, dot my I's, and do the best that I can to at least ensure that what you're getting, like to you said, Bryce, that these ingredients really work and that they're safe for us in this phase of life.
Absolutely. What's the best seller right now or best sellers?
Oh, we've got so many. So we have our Fiber S product, which has an ingredient guar fiber in it, which is sun fiber from sun fiber. So that's a really good seller. We have our magnesium that is awesome. I'd say that's our number one seller is our magnesium, excellent for over, I don't know, 600 different functions in your body. Most of us are
Sure.
deficient, but it's really important when it comes to sleep, anxiety, energy. Like if you're taking, it's a magnesium bisglycinate. So magnesium is incredible. And then our Sleep S formula, which is a formula that I formulated, it has 4 ingredients that help to tackle with sleep issues. And we now know, and we didn't really talk about this, but I'll go into this really quickly, is that our sleep issues survey, which is also going to be published in the journal
Mhm.
Menopause or abstract, we know there's 3 reasons that women are not sleeping well in perimenopause and menopause. Number 1 is they wake up between 2 and 4 a.m. And when I heard that and I saw that, I'm like, oh, it's got to be cortisol rising at the wrong time. It's got to be anxiety. But I couldn't get it from the data in that sleep survey. So we created another one called an anxiety survey. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So number
Okay.
1 is waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. and having a very hard time falling back asleep. Number 2 is visiting the bathroom. Like, so women will say they wake up every hour on the hour, or they wake up 3, 4 times a night to go pee. And then the third one is night sweats. So our Sleep Us formula actually tackles the waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., which we now know is due to anxiety because our anxiety survey, we looked at women and we asked them, what are the reasons? It was an open ended question. What are the reasons you're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m.? 67% said it's due to anxiety, anxious feelings, heart palpitations, mind racing, whatever it is. So we know that it's anxiety is that number 1. So Sleep Us tackles the number 1 reason, which is our anxiety, and the number 2 reason, which is bathroom visits, because it helps to increase vasopressin. So it's an antidiuretic hormone. So you're not peeing as much during the night. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you're falling back asleep because it has sustained release melatonin. It has L-theanine. It has suntheanine in it. It has an ingredient called lactium, and it has our magnesium. So I would say, like, if you're having sleep issues, magnesium and Sleep Us are like, oh, like, I take it every single night myself. Like it is like a game changer for sleep. So I would say those are our
Nice.
top 3 for sure.
I love it. And, again, we talked about how hormones can inform, what the genetics behind the hormones and how your body is, predisposed to metabolizing them can help inform the protocol, that is to say, bioidentical hormone therapy and how much and so forth. But a lot of these nutraceuticals are incredibly helpful to manage up or down regulate or turn that dial on the genetic hormonal cascade as well. So To unlock the power of your DNA, folks, and redefine your menopause journey, I highly recommend, can't recommend it enough, the DNA 360 test. This will help you dive into personalized insights that can help you manage menopause symptoms, optimize your health, take control of your future. And as a special offer from Andrea Donsky's community, we're using the code MORPHUS50, MORPHUS 50. You can use that at checkout. That's for $50 off your DNA 360 test today. So empower yourself with a science-backed solution tailored just for you. Don't miss out on this exclusive offer to start living your best life. And I love that line that you've created. I also feel remiss if I didn't have you talk a little bit about, besides sleep hygiene, and the sleep, the Morphus product you just described, movement and exercise. I mean, just give us 2 cents around the importance. I get it, it's a chicken and egg scenario. You got to have the the hormone regulation to want to experience the impetus and or the desire to move. But what's the most important take home message for perimenopause and menopausal
Mm.
individuals to just get active?
Strength
How
training.
important?
It's
Yeah,
really important to strength train. Our muscles are breaking down much quicker than they are building in this phase of life. And we now know, and you talked about this, you alluded to this before, we know that muscle is linked to longevity. So
yeah,
it's really important, and brain health. So it's really important that we avoid, because we're more prone to sarcopenia. So movement, even if you can't, if you walk, you're going for your daily walk and you have like your 3 pound weights or your 5 pound weights. I mean, it is important to do more of a more robust strength training program and lifting heavier weights. But I would say movement is really important, and also managing your stress, by the way. So you talked about the nervous system before. We know we're more stressed. 66% of us are more anxious now than we were before, according to our research. So we really want to make sure that, you can exercise outside, but also trying to manage your stress as best as you can. So deep breathing, meditation, walks in nature, your Shinru, your
yeah.
Roku, which you love, and spending time with people, pets you love, and avoiding people that may cause you anxiety and make you more anxious. So just doing things that help to minimize, so that your nervous system can help calm down. You can help calm down your nervous system a bit, but lifting weights it's a non-negotiable as we get. And actually, my podcast, I just recently did a podcast with an exercise specialist expert who talked about that and the importance of it in perimenopause and menopause. And it helps us cope better with stress, right? So exercise helps you cope better with stress. And when you're exercising, you don't think about your stress as much. So it's just, there's benefits all around.
Amazing. We'll get that in the notes on the podcast notes, and we'll link back to that podcast, which I'm sure was excellent. We don't want to open that can of worms. And the Power of Menopause event. This is an online virtual summit. We're just scratching the surface here, folks, but we're going to be diving deep into this and all topics related to perimenopause and menopause on October 25th. Which is just down around the corner, actually. Share with us, what people can look forward to hearing about, learning about, experiencing in this virtual event, the Power of Menopause.
Yeah, so it's a free event. It's a free online event. It's from 9 to 5. And if you can't attend, don't worry. You register. You can access the recordings after if you want them. And we have incredible speakers, including yourself, Bryce, which I'm really excited about. So you're going to be speaking, and we're going to be talking about so many different topics: vaginal health, heart health, sleep. We're going to talk about exercise. So we've got you covered. And all you have to do is, go to thepowerofmenopause.com, thepowerofmenopause.com, register for free, share it with your friends, share it with anyone that you know is over the age of 35. And one thing I do want to leave you with is that for those of you who might be listening, if you're in your 60s and perhaps you're like, oh, I am well past that, well past menopause. Once you're in menopause for the rest of your life. So this
Mhm.
information will be especially important for you as well. So I don't want you to dismiss it thinking that you've been in menopause for a long time, it doesn't pertain to you. No, absolutely it does. Because
Right.
any of us, once we go through menopause, like puberty, once you are through it, you are in it for the rest of your life. And it is ultra important that you pay attention to nutrition, to supplements, to lifestyle like exercise and managing your stress, and or hormones, if that is something you choose to do. So please, very important. And I would love you to attend. I'd love you to register and share it with anybody that you think can benefit from this information.
Good stuff. And just before we wrap here, we've actually got a question from one of our followers specifically for you, who's asking, what is the most effective technology for night sweats that actually works? While Andrea does her due diligence, but technology. So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. One of which I'll share in a moment, if this is not your best choice. But again, I guess what she's asking is night sweats, are going to happen, and whether it's hormone replacement or a Morphus product or it's some kind of intervention informed by the DNA 360, there still might be some residual additional, waking up from, hot sweats here and there. Is there a technology that can help, surpass some of this experience for folks?
So what I love is actually anything that's gonna cool the bed because
Mhm.
there's so many options out there. So you can do something like the bed jet, chili pad, like there's different things that you can do that will help to keep you cool at night. And I would say for me, if somebody's having those night sweats, like first of all, making sure your room is cold, 65 to 68 degrees, making sure you're sleeping in light PJs, or maybe you want to sleep in nothing, making sure that your blanket isn't heavy, right? Because that
Right.
can make you hot as well. So you can use cooling sheets. I mean, there are different things that you can do, but from a technology standpoint, I would like to see, I believe something that's going to help cool you down is great. And if you don't want to spend the money on it, then even ice packs. Like we have actually an ice pack, a cooling pack that we sell at Morphus. It's like 9.99, and you could put ice in it. And then you can keep it, you can get a few of them, keep it in your bed, and it'll stay cold for like 6 to 8 hours. So it's awesome. So anything that's going to cool you down, to me, put it behind your neck, anything, put even just regular ice packs, put them on the inside of your thighs, anything, bottom of your feet, anything that's going to help to cool your body can be very, very helpful for night sweats. And
Well, and
unfortunately, I
I
know it
heard
because I had them. Like they're
right.
brutal.
Well, and I heard you talk about the bed jet some time ago, and I actually invested in one, got one for my wife, thinking maybe it would come in handy sooner than later. She's not quite there yet, but I get so hot at night, and it's not just in the summer; it's all year long. I just heat up. I don't know. I'm an oven. I have a very high metabolism, and it just turns on at night. Anyways, I've used the bed jet over the last year. It is incredible. I
I
love
love it. I
sleeping
love
cool,
it.
and it's just nice, cool wind, that goes under your cover. So I think that's amazing. Future trends. I mean, I know you're immersed in research right now, writing your book, doing the research. You're getting published. It'll be out in December. But is there anything, especially because if we don't talk AI just real quick, we're not part of the fad, but AI driven menopause insights. Of course, there's the genomic side, but anything that sort of hit your radar is really cool that will help crack the code on making perimenopause, menopause an easier transition, informed by AI or anything in that realm.
I know that it was covered extensively at the Menopause Society. So, what I would
Yeah.
highly recommend is going to menopause.org and looking on their website because it was a big part of the conference this year at looking at AI in terms of helping with, how do you like helping to, you know, your symptoms and helping with I hate using the word diagnoses because it's not a disease, but it's kind of one of those easy things to understand, as well as treatment. So absolutely go to menopause.org, and go check out their website to see because it was a huge part of the conference.
Awesome. Couple of myths that I heard you debunk today. Just want to reiterate before we conclude. Hormone replacement therapy is dangerous for everybody. That's out.
Yep, out.
Menopause only affects older women.
Out.
That's out. Menopause, once it's over, you can simply just go back to normal. No.
That's and it's not so much so let me clarify because it's nuanced. It's not that you can't go back to normal or like one of the things we hear a lot is, "Oh, I want to feel like my old self." So it's not that it's that they feel a lot of women will say to me they feel that they don't need to pay attention to how to menopause or education or anything around it because they're already past it. That's out.
Right.
It's actually really important now that you pay more attention to what you're eating, how you're managing your stress, what are you putting in and on your body? How are you exercising? What supplements are you taking? Are you using hormones or not? All of this is important because we want to avoid the big 3, right? You want to look at how do we prevent heart disease, dementia, osteoporosis, like all of these are important. So speak to somebody that is educated, that understands you know you understand your body best, but that has a history with you and understands menopause that can really help guide you in the right direction.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, the Power of Menopause live event is aiming to educate women and offer solutions to help them live empowered lives. So, featuring speakers covering all aspects of perimenopause and menopause. The event's going to attract well over 5,000. And as you heard from Andy, if you can't make it live, there's recordings. So just register at thepowerofmenopause.com. Is that it? Did I get that
Yep.
right?
The power of
And
menopause.
join thousands of like-minded women seeking answers, real relief, real life stuff, natural stuff. And it's an event that will give you the tools and education you need to make your menopause or perimenopause journey smoother and more empowered. So whether you're dealing with night sweats or hot flashes, low libido, or you just want to prepare yourself for menopause, this is your opportunity to take back control and take control with the DNA 360 test. Get personalized insights tailored just for you. There's a lot of information out there, but what's going to work best for you? Where do you best spend your money, your time, your resources? Use code MORPHUS50, MORPHUS50, and you grab your $50 off today. Your health, your power, redefined, as Andrea likes to call it. Thanks so much, Andy. Where can people find you online on social media? And of course, that 340,000 very impressive TikTok following that you've got.
So my website is wearemorphus.com. So our company is Morphus. So metamorphosis, morph
Yeah.
us as a community. So it's wearemorphus.com. Again, like you said, on TikTok, I have an awesome community there. So at Andrea Donsky. And we also have Instagram and TikTok at We Are Morphus. So we have different ways that you can get in touch with us. But if you do have questions, you can absolutely DM us on social media. And then you can also send us an email to info@wearemorphus.com. We are very proud of ourselves when it comes to customer service. So if you have any questions about, a product that you think that you're interested in, or you have questions, yeah, send us an email.
Amazing. And we'd like to thank you all for joining today's episode of the DNA Talks podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, especially if there's a concern for a particular topic that you'd like us to discuss or cover. You may also, don't forget, listen to this on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Share the news, friends and family. Forward this. People will love you for it, we promise. And if you wish to learn more, add us to your list of liked podcasts so you can be up to date when the next one drops. Speaking of being up to date, you can also find us on Instagram at DNA Talks Podcast, as well as my own at Wild on Health. And once again, Andy, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see everybody else at the next one.
Thanks, Bryce.